Mixing with Mike plugin of the week is the Eventide UltraChannel. So the Eventide UltraChannel is just that. It's a channel strip plugin that comes with an input section, phase reverse control. It's got a gate, compressor, an oppressor, which is part of an emulation of their hardware oppressor, a 5-band parametric EQ, a micro pitch shift effect, and a delay effect, all in one unit. So the idea is that you have all of these individual components. Now, what's cool about this is that we can take any individual component and we can move it in any order that we want. So it would be typical if you were going to gate, you would gate first. But if you say, for example, you wanted to put the compressor after the EQ, you could have compression prior to the EQ and compression after the EQ. So maybe we want to do a little more functional compression prior to the EQ. We want to do a little bit more heavy-duty compression after the EQ. We can move around the individual elements to kind of organize them to do whatever it is that we want. And then we have an output section. So we really have an input, gate, compressor, 5-band EQ, oppressor, which is like a little bit, got more of a vintage kind of character to it, and an output section. Now, running parallel to this is the micro pitch shift, and this has a mix control on it, so we can actually place this into the circuit, and we have delays that run into this. So the dry signal passes through the micro pitch shift and feeds into the delays, which can be added to the original signal or in addition to the original signal. And the idea is that this can be like a full processing chain, and you can use any individual element by placing them in or out, right? So we could take any of the individual circuits and put them in or out. So if we start with the input section, what we have is a simple phase reverse. Now, it doesn't phase reverse left from right. It actually just phase reverses both sides together. So, which, I kind of prefer when you can do like separate left-right on a stereo channel. It has an input meter here, but it doesn't really show separation of left and right. And you have a gain control here. The gate is just kind of like a normal gate control, right? So here I can actually just set a threshold, and since I've got it on the mix bus, you're not going to hear it, but I have a click track feeding into the side chain, and what this would allow me to do is trigger it from another source. 16th notes, right? You get the basic idea. So we have a gate, and that will function well for certain sounds or tracks. So you could use this on individual tracks, or I have it just on the mix bus, just for example here. When we have a standard kind of compressor, which can also be keyed by the sidechain, threshold control, and you could see the level, so you can adjust the input, and you could see the gain reduction. Here, there's an output gain control, and you have the normal attack, release, sustain, ratio controls that you would see on a compressor, and also a knee control. So with a 0 dB knee, then you have a hard knee, and then you can make it a softer knee by going to a higher setting. So this is like the crossfade effect of the ratio, right, as it's applied once the threshold is exceeded. So with this, I could just do like a simple kind of functional, little more clear kind of compression. So maybe I want to like slow down the attack a little bit and get this to kind of breathe a little bit. So maybe what I'll do is I'll set my release time here to something around, maybe just set it to like 52 milliseconds. That'll give it some kind of musical timing or somewhere in that vicinity. And, well, maybe minus it. Now, what's also built into this, and I'm going to decrease this right here, is an output or makeup gain control. So I'll have the ability to make up for any loss gain that I might have going on. And I could do like a light kind of compression here. It also has a built-in de-esser and a saturation control. So the saturation control is like a soft limiter. So it'll prevent you from peaking. So all soft limiters do is they take any peak signals and they sort of round them off more or less. So if you hit it really hard, it's post-gain control. So I can take this whole mix and saturated, but if you look at the mix bus, it doesn't ever clip because it won't let the signal go above that. So it has a hard ceiling, but the harder you hit it, the more you mash against it, the more distortion you're going to get. And that's the basic idea. So that's kind of cool. It's just, you know, pretty straightforward. Nothing particularly special sonically about it. It's not emulating anything. You have a 5-band EQ, and on the outside bands, you can apply filters at different, first order, second order noise filter, or a low shelf, or you can turn it into a peaking EQ. So when I place this in, what's really cool is that with the Q control, I can actually have a resonant characteristic. So I can actually filter and use this to add a little boost or thump. Right, and find that frequency that kind of works, and you know, this can exaggerate it to greater or lesser degrees with the Q. So we have a resonant filter here, and I could do the same thing on the top end, which allows me to kind of sort of add a bit of air on the top, you know, while still cutting high frequencies, you know, that type of thing. So sometimes that can actually be, you know, an effective kind of thing. And more, I wouldn't consider this like really a mastering tool, but you could do something like this. You get up around 17K or so. And what's really cool about the mid-band stuff is that, you know, from the mid-bands, if you decrease or you set the Q to be very narrow, it becomes a really, really kind of cool notch filtering kind of thing. So here you can kind of, helps when you put it into the circuit. So it's pretty kind of cool because you can get in there and do like a notching type of a thing there with it in terms of adding, you know, the frequencies in. So I probably should retune this. So they're reacting a little bit slowly there on that side of things. But yeah, so anyway, so now this is just kind of like a fun thing that you can play with. The Q it's very narrow kind of Q, and they give you two forms of it. They give you what they call a classic peak and a modern peak. And I think the modern peak is a little bit narrower when I guess it has like a different characteristic shape, slightly different varied shape. So it is kind of like a basically pretty good functional EQ. The oppressor is a little bit more like a vintage kind of crushing kind of compressor. So you can give it a significant amount of gain reduction. Can be fed from a side chain as well. And you could use this to kind of make things pump and breathe. What's really cool here is that it actually has a bass cut. So what you can do is if you roll off the low frequencies, what this does, it doesn't cut the frequencies in terms of what you hear. It cuts off what feeds the actual threshold. So if you do this, then less low frequencies will be driving the compression and more transient peaks will. So it's not as if it's like multi-banding it or just applying the compression to you know, the high end and not the low end, but what is making the compressor actually trigger, or the oppressor in this case. They also on the output stage have a transformer stage, and this like adds like a transformer warming circuitry, and it's after the output gain. So if you crank the output gain, you can overdrive it a little bit. So you can kind of work within like the saturation stages of the compressor here and overdrive it. You got a saturation stage at the output, which is kind of cool. And then you got this like micro pitch shift. And what this does is it can add sort of like a subtle, like, you know, kind of chorus effect to the whole thing. So it's like a pitch widening kind of effect, and you could determine like how wide that you want it to be, how much depth of movement in terms of modulation it has, what the overall size of it is. this as like a little way of like, I think it would work better with an individual instrument and that type of thing. Also, you could do thing here with the stereo delays. Just bring down the output here for a second, or the input. And so what we can do is we can also add in delays. And what's kind of cool is that you can feedback the delays into a particular section. So in other words, the feedback of the delay can go back into the EQ instead of just going right back directly into the delay. So if you have feedback control coming from here, and you can sync the timing. So if you select tempo sync, then what we can do is go to 16th note steps throughout for the delays of the left and right. You have separate pan controls for each, separate feedback controls for each. And the idea there is that you can mix these in along with the dry signal. All right, so and you can hear like, that's like obviously very excessive in terms of the feedback. But, the basic idea there is that you can, on an individual sound, this actually could be a really cool kind of effect. And then I can also back off the amount of it relative to this if I'm blending it in with the signal that's going on here. So, so this gives like a lot of different varied levels of control as far as just, the ability to take any sound to work with the individual effects and kind of get like a whole effect chain kind of thing happening, other than reverb almost, right within a single stereo channel. But overall, it's pretty cool. Nice little device, gives you a lot of functionality. Sort of reminds me, Eventide is famous for like their H3000, 3500, 4500, DSP 4000 multi effects processors. And this has like a little bit of that type of thing in it with EQ, compression, the micro pitch shift, the delays. It just doesn't have reverb. And it's not really set up that way, but that was what, to me, Eventide was really, really good at that type of stuff. That was really, to me, where they kind of made their money on things. So, but this is a pretty cool thing, and you can't beat the price. So there you have it. There's our plugin of the week, the Eventide UltraChannel.